Is space truly empty? Or is it just waiting? For eons, the galactic cartographers spoke of Sector 84G in hushed, terrified whispers. They called it the Maw, a place where physics seemed to unravel, where star clusters were strangled by erratic gravitational tides, and where the radiation from a nearby pulsar stripped the hull of any ship brave enough to enter. In 10,000 years of recorded history, the Council had sent 74 automated probes into that darkness. None returned. They sent 3 scout fleets of the indestructible Valari. All disappeared. To the galaxy, Sector 84G was the ultimate graveyard, a place where life was mathematically impossible. But what happens when you take a species born in a forge and throw them into the furnace? What happens when a species that spent its childhood fighting for every breath on a death world looks at the Maw and doesn't see a grave, but a foundation? Underscore. The High Council of the Federated Reach lived in the soft sectors. Their planets were gardens, their suns were stable, and their lives were predictable. To them, the universe was a place of elegance and order. Sector 84G is a cosmic error, the High Arbiter had declared during the Great Mapping. It is a region of high-density asteroid belts, solar flares that can melt titanium, and a gravitational pull that would collapse a Xylanthi's ribcage in seconds. No biological entity can survive there. It is a dead zone. Forever. They were so sure. They were so confident in their science. They didn't even bother looking at the sector for 300 years. Why look at a void? Why study a tomb? But then, a long-range deep space sensor picked up something impossible. A signal, not a distress call, and not the random radiation of a dying star. It was a rhythmic, pulsing beat. A signature of heavy industry. Could it be a ghost ship? Kalen, the young data analyst, wondered as he stared at the screen. Or is the Maw finally spitting out the wrecks of the ships it swallowed? The Council, driven by a mixture of fear and scientific curiosity, sent a cloaked observation frigate to the edge of 84G. They expected to see ruins. They expected to see a graveyard of floating metal. Instead, they found a miracle. Underscore. As the observation ship crossed the threshold of the sector, the crew gasped in collective horror. The radiation levels were off the charts. The asteroid belt was a chaotic storm of iron and ice, moving at speeds that should have pulverized anything in its path. How is anything still intact? Kalen whispered, his 4 eyes twitching in shock. The gravitational shear here is enough to tear a freighter in half. Then they saw it. Tethered between 3 massive asteroids, anchored by cables of hypertensile carbon, stood a structure that defied every law of Council architecture. It wasn't sleek. It wasn't beautiful. It was a fortress of jagged steel and reinforced concrete, glowing with the dull red heat of 1,000 fusion reactors. Identification? The captain barked. The computer's voice was flat, struggling to process the data. Unknown architecture. Signature matches. Humanity. Humans. The Arbiter's voice crackled through the comms. The bipedal apes from the class, 12 Death World? They were supposed to be extinct by now. How could they be here, in the heart of the Maw? The Council watched as a solar flare, a massive tongue of fire from the local star, lashed out across the sector. It was enough to incinerate a Xylanthi fleet. But as the fire hit the human fortress, something incredible happened. Massive magnetic shields flared to life, shimmering with a defiant blue light. The station didn't move. It didn't buckle. It absorbed the fire and channeled it into its own batteries. They aren't just surviving, Kalen realized, his voice trembling. They are They are feeding on the danger. But why? Why would anyone choose to live in a place that wants them dead? Suddenly, a human voice cut through the council ship's encrypted frequency. It wasn't a warning. It was a greeting. This is Commander Elias of the Bastion Station. You're drifting a bit close to the gravitational well, friends. We'd suggest you adjust your heading by 5 degrees, or you're going to have a very short, very fast trip into a sun. The Xylanthi captain was too stunned to speak. Commander, how are you alive? No species has survived this sector. The radiation alone should have cooked you weeks ago. There was a pause. Then, a short, dry chuckle. The radiation? Yeah, it's a bit of a tan, isn't it? Elias replied. Look, we didn't come here because it was easy. We came here because nobody else wanted it. On Earth, we have a saying. One man's trash is another man's treasure. In the galaxy, you see a death trap. We see an infinite power source and more mineral wealth than the entire Federated Reach combined. Kalen watched the monitors. He saw human workers in heavy, armored exosuits, jumping from asteroid to asteroid. He saw them using the very gravitational tides that the galaxy feared to slingshot their mining drones. Then, disaster struck. A rogue comet, shifted by the erratic gravity, was hurtling directly toward the Xylanthi observation ship. The aliens froze. Their sleek ship was built for peace, not for dodging mountains of ice in a high-G environment. Engines failing. Kalen screamed. The gravity, it's too strong. We can't move. Hold your breath, neighbors. Elias's voice came back, sharper now. We're coming for you. The council watched as the human fortress, the bastion, did something impossible. It didn't fire a weapon. Instead, it shifted its own massive gravitational anchors. 2 human tugcraft, ugly, boxy ships that looked more like engines with cockpits, flew out into the chaos. They didn't use elegant anti-gravity plates. They used raw, chemical-burning thrusters that roared with a primal fury. What are they doing? The Arbiter shouted. They're going to be crushed. The human pilots didn't hesitate. They didn't ask about the odds. They maneuvered their ships between the Comet and the Xylanthi frigate. Using a combination of magnetic harpoons and sheer, brute force thrust, they began to push. It was a battle of wills. The raw physics of a dying sector versus the stubbornness of a human pilot. The metal of the human ships groaned. The heat shields turned a blinding white. Why are they doing this? Kalen asked, tears of awe in his eyes. We mocked them. We ignored them. We called their home a grave. Why would they risk their lives for us? With a final, earth-shaking roar of the engines, the humans forced the comet off course. It sailed past the Xylanthi ship by a few hundred meters, disappearing into the dark. The human ships drifted, their hulls scorched and battered, but their pilots were already checking their sensors, looking for the next task. You're clear, Xylanthi, Elias said, his voice a bit tired but still steady. Maybe next time, bring a ship that can handle a little weather. As the council ship limped out of Sector 84G, the crew looked back at the fortress one last time. It no longer looked like a jagged pile of scrap. It looked like a monument. Kalen stood at the viewport, watching the blue flicker of the human shields as another solar flare hit them. He realized that the Council's paradise worlds had made them weak. They had spent millions of years avoiding the dark, while the humans had been born in it, raised by it, and eventually had mastered it. We thought the maw was a tomb, Kalen whispered to the Arbiter. But the humans didn't see a tomb. They saw a home that would make them even stronger. The High Arbiter sat in silence, looking at the data from the extinct species. He realized that the galaxy didn't need more gardens. It needed guardians. It needed people who weren't afraid of the storm. Change the classification of Sector 84G. The Arbiter commanded softly. To what, sir? The shield. And the humans? Do not call them primitives again. Call them the masters of the maw. The galaxy finally understood. Humanity didn't build a fortress to hide from the galaxy. They built it to protect the galaxy from the things they were the only ones brave enough to face. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Understood. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Humanity may be small, but our spirit is as vast as the void itself. See you in the next sector.